This week, we're talking about one of a kind.
The one and only.
We're at the end of the year, which makes it the perfect time to ask, what have you done with your life? What have you accomplished? Any unique accomplishments you can add to your life's achievements? Well, have you ever heard of Ben Carlin? After World War II, he bought a military surplus amphibious Jeep. It was a DIY project to turn this thing into a vehicle that would be up to circumnavigating the globe. He named his amphibious Jeep Half Safe. And from Montreal in 1957, he departed. After a few false starts and many interruptions, the next 10 years were spent traveling over sea and land.
Ben Carlin and his American wife Eleanor reach Melbourne in their amphibious Jeep, which they call Half Safe.
Over the next 10 years, Ben took the Half Safe 18,000 kilometers over the sea.
They brought her across the Atlantic.
And 63,000 kilometers over land.
Unlike most ships, she's just as much at home on dry land.
Over 50,000 miles.
And halfway around the world.
He traveled across 38 countries and 2 oceans. He even came through British Columbia. The Peace River suspension bridge had collapsed, so people had to wait in line for a ferry. But not Ben. He just drove his amphibious Jeep right across that river. And in 1958, he concluded his journey in Montreal. To date, according to the Guinness World Records, Ben Carlin is credited as being the first and only person to circumnavigate the globe with an amphibious vehicle. Only one who's done it. One of a kind.
The one and only.
And now we get to the part where I tell you how this relates to the book of James. Well, James is also a man we can credit with being the only one, the one and only, the one of a kind to do something. And it's this. James is the one and only New Testament writer to use a specific name for God in his writing where he's not directly citing and attributing the Old Testament. It appears one other place in a direct quotation. In Romans 9:29, Paul tells us he's quoting from Isaiah, and he relays a passage from Isaiah that includes this name for God. You know, James has been doing a lot of teaching against worldliness. Friendship with the world is enmity with God. You can't be a friend of the world and a friend of God. So give your allegiance to the sovereign, authoritative, living, and true God. So now James turns to the worldliness that manifests itself when someone's consumed with wealth, with riches.
Money, money, money.
In James 5:1 we read, "Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you." Putting our hope in our wealth is bad. Just like the end of chapter 4 said that ignoring God's lordship, thinking we can plan out our lives without recognizing that we are dependent on God and subject to his will, that's bad. That's sin. Ignoring God's lordship and trusting our wealth is also sin. Now, it's not riches that God is against. It's greed and it's selfishness. It's the rejection of his lordship. Possessions rot. James talks about all the stuff that can happen to our stuff. Moths can eat it up. It corrodes. So selfishly hoarding all that stuff, exploiting others, taking advantage of others to gain more, God isn't pleased with that. And here's where James pulls off his unique action, where he's the only one to use this name for God where it doesn't appear in a specifically cited Old Testament quotation. James 5:4. "Behold, the hire of the laborers you have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth." Did you catch the name at the end? Lord of Sabaoth. James brings a Hebrew word into Greek to call God the Lord of armies, or the Lord of hosts. He's the Lord of heavenly hosts. And this is the name James uses for God. Now, I have to put up a little disclaimer here. There is probably, almost definitely, an Old Testament passage behind James' use of this title for God. Isaiah 5:9. In mine ears, said the Lord of hosts, of a truth many houses shall be desolate, even great and fair, without inhabitant. Fields are in the context of both. Both talk about God hearing and both use this title, Lord of hosts. The Septuagint uses the same word-for-word Greek phrase, into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. But James doesn't even tell us he's quoting from the prophets. So Paul uses it also, but it still makes it pretty rare. James uses it here, this majestic title for the Lord, creator and ruler of the world, commander of the hosts of heaven. So why does James choose this title for God? Well, here's the thing. Even though James is writing about the sins committed by wealthy people, he's not really writing this for the wealthy. He's writing this for the sake of Christians, presumably poor Christians, financially poor Christians who are being oppressed and exploited and used and abused by the wealthy. And he brings in this name for God that would bring to mind the God who all throughout the Old Testament where this name is used. He does it to remind Christians that this is the God that they have on their side, the Lord of hosts. Whatever tyranny God's people might be under, there's a more powerful ruler. There's the Lord of hosts, the supreme ruler. No matter who's taking advantage of you for their own gain, no matter what mistreatment you are suffering because of the worldliness of others, the Lord of hosts will deal with them. You might be powerless, but you be righteous. To use the term James uses in verse 6, you live according to God's standard. Give him your loyalty, your allegiance, and trust the Lord of hosts to do what is best. As the worldliness of others causes suffering all around you, show him you trust him by praying to him, crying out in prayer, and you can have the confidence that the Lord of hosts will hear you. That's not to say God will deliver you anytime soon. You might suffer for the rest of your life, but the righteous will not suffer forever. The unrighteous will, but the friend of God has eternity to look forward to, living under the loving rule of the Lord of hosts. So thank God, whether you're being mistreated or not, thank God that he is the Lord of hosts. And thank him for the comfort that brings. He is there for those who give him their allegiance. This is a message we need because there is a lot of suffering in this world. There is a lot of oppression. And the answer, the most important thing the oppressed need, isn't better earthly conditions. It's a relationship with God that they need most of all, where they trust and depend on him as their Lord, the Lord of hosts. And one day he will do what only he can do. He will set everything right for those who give their allegiance to him. By God's grace, everyone, rich or poor, has the opportunity to hope if they know the Lord Jesus. So what can you do? Everyone's greatest need is salvation. People need the gospel, the good news. Discouraged Christians need to remember the hope they have in the Lord of hosts. So maybe you're the one that needs to trust the good news of Jesus Christ, who died and rose from the grave. Maybe you need to call upon him to save you. Or maybe you're already a Christian who just needs to be encouraged. Earthly authorities may mistreat us, but the Lord of hosts will never mistreat you. He has a good plan. He will take care of you. And do you think there's anyone you could encourage by sharing the hope you have with them? Even reminding another Christian of the hope that you share. Any of these would make for a worthy accomplishment.
With 4 starts and delays, including imprisonment in Gibraltar, the trip's taken 7 years. The first 7 are always the worst, even in a half-ship, half-jeep that's called half-safe.
Hey, thanks for watching another James video, number 25. So besides watching this video, what have you accomplished this year? Here's something you can accomplish. Like and subscribe. Share this video with a friend. Tell anyone you want. And I'll see you next time.